I'm sure you've all seen the meme. We're 6 months away from AI taking our jobs as developers forever. And while this is a meme that we've been saying for years, I'm starting to really feel it. There have just been so many signals that things are actually changing now. From Baby Keem using OpenClaw, to the top G talking shit on it, to Cloudflare rewriting Next.js in a week using AI, to CEOs that barely even code, building whole apps from scratch, cloning billion-dollar companies in just a few days, to Jack, the original CEO of Twitter, laying off 40% of his employees at Block, even though they're profitable and growing. This is terrifying. We are there now.
Tech hiring has slowed down immensely over the past few years. If you've been keeping up with the news, you've probably heard countless news stories about Fortune 500 companies laying off thousands of employees as a cost-cutting measure to pump up their stock price and also invest more money into AI. For the past 3 years or so, CEOs from AI companies have been telling us we're only 6 months away from the end of software engineering being a viable career. We're told AI tools will write all the code and companies won't need engineers anymore. But if you take a look at their job postings, these same companies are still hiring for software engineering positions, even though the public claim has been that the job role itself is dying out. So today, I want to actually explore this concept of the death of software development and tech jobs a bit more, from a more entry-level job seeker point of view, alongside, of course, the rise of SaaS products which are being built to replace entire teams. To do that, I have two questions I want to ask. Firstly, for people such as myself trying to land their first job in tech, why would a company hire you or me if they can just pay for a SaaS product that already does the entry-level job? Secondly, with the rise of AI tools doing more entry-level work, what happens to the entry-level job positions themselves? To explore our first question, we need a bit of historical context. Back in the early days of manufacturing, companies such as Ford had factories full of workers who would assemble each car by hand. These were reliable jobs since, without any employees in your factory, no cars would be getting built. But as technology advanced and more machines were introduced into assembly lines, suddenly becoming a factory worker was no longer a guaranteed career. Car companies could produce more cars with less workers, meaning the same people who previously assembled cars in factories were getting laid off. These layoffs caused a major issue, that being factory workers had skills that could not be directly transferred into other careers. If an accountant gets fired from one job, chances are there's another business down the road which needs someone to manage their books. But for these factory workers, their question then became, what does a factory worker do for a living when factories no longer need them? A similar shift has been happening in tech with the continued rise of SaaS products. If you're not familiar with the term, SaaS stands for Software as a Service. These tend to be online services or tools you can't directly buy or own, rather, the service lets you pay to use the product, whether that's in the form of a subscription or maybe paying for a license. One of the most common examples would be a product such as Netflix. You subscribe to watch movies and shows, but if you stop paying, they stop letting you watch. SaaS tools are also pretty common in tech. For example, developers pay for access to the OpenAI API, or they pay transaction fees for a service such as Stripe, so they can add a payment gateway to their note-taking app and make you pay for the OpenAI cost instead. For a company, SaaS products have a ton of benefits. To list a few, they can reduce complexity during app development, meaning code bases shrink, since instead of building something in-house, you can just pay for a solution that adds the feature your app needs. Secondly, SaaS products can also offer access to organized data. Rather than needing to scrape the internet yourself, just pay someone else who already did that, and also packaged all the data into a neat little API you can plug into your app. Also, if a company needs an internal tool for managing their employees or handling payroll, there are a ton of SaaS tools for that as well. And for solo developers such as myself, it's becoming easier and easier to build a side project when I can fill in the gaps my own app needs by paying for some SaaS tools such as a hosted database. But here's the other side of that same coin. Companies now need less employees and less developers. A company no longer needs a big team to build a custom database solution when they can just pay for a service like Convex or Supabase and keep a smaller team of developers who manage the backend and keep things running. Building a custom login system for a mobile app can instead just be replaced with Firebase authentication, meaning a company now needs less numbers of security-focused junior developers, since of course, Firebase already comes in with a ton of documentation. Also, platforms such as AWS and Vercel reduce the need for a massive DevOps team. Today, a small group of software engineers can deploy their app globally. And let's also not forget the rise of customer support systems. A business no longer needs a team of employees to build internal tools when they can just pay for a service like Zendesk or Intercom, which already take care of functions such as handling support tickets. A customer support team now shrinks because guess what? We now have this service that automates a large part of the job. I could keep going, but I'm sure you're beginning to notice a trend in all the examples I provided. The common factor being companies need less people. This of course has its benefits. A major example of this being startups. A 4-person team can now build, ship, and market a product all on their own and watch it turn into an actual business that makes money. That's great for startups and self-funded projects, but when you're just a graduate who's searching for their first ever job, then things get a bit harder, especially if a SaaS product can do your entry-level job and only cost the company $200 a month. However, as you may have seen in the news lately, even if you're someone who has years of experience, that does not mean your job is safe either. Which brings us to our second question.
If your company currently has more engineers than they had last year, there's a very high chance there will be layoffs by the end of the year. Everything is changing. Block is just the start here. We're at the beginning of the end. I don't know what is ending, and I don't know what it'll be replaced with. I just want to make sure I raise the alarm bells because I know other creators just make memes about how we're 36 months into 6 months until Eng is dead. Being paid to type in lines of code is over. Any place that hasn't realized that is just behind now. And that includes the major labs too, to be fully clear. I don't got any wisdom here. I want to make sure we are being realistic about where shit's going. And I'm really not interested in the takes of the unemployed and people who aren't in industry and aren't watching this as it changes. I'm telling you guys this from the ground floor.
As I mentioned at the start of this piece, layoffs have been rampant over the past year or so. The stock price has to keep going up in order to provide shareholder value, but what does a company do if they are already a monopoly in their industry and can no longer grow naturally? Well, you force the growth by firing people, since as we know, people cost money. But you need a way to prevent the stockholders from panicking and selling their shares, which in turn would tank the stock price. So, what's a convenient excuse you can use? Well, AI, of course. As a developer myself, I'll be first in line to tell you about how helpful tools such as Codex are at speeding up the development process, writing code, and building apps. The actual underlying technology behind these is pretty groundbreaking. However, when Klarna starts laying off people because they believe AI can be used to automate customer support jobs, and Duolingo starts using AI to spit out more language learning courses which were previously being worked on by actual employees who are now being let go, I think it's time to admit that AI is also being used as a very convenient reason to justify a whole lot of shady business practices. I mean, more and more companies are chasing profitability by leaning on AI tools to handle work that still needs human oversight. Video game studios are firing artists in favor of AI-generated art, and voice actors are being replaced with AI text-to-speech tools. And those two examples alone are a very small sample of these types of business practices, which raise a similar question to the one I brought up earlier. Like the factory workers who came before, where do video game artists and voice actors now go if companies no longer need them? In tech companies, tools such as Codex and Claude Code allow developers to push out more code. This is great for productivity, but starts to introduce new problems such as the rise of vibe coding in a company setting. Developers are producing more code, but then things start to break more often.
The anxiety is rational, which is why it sticks. Every week, some new benchmark drops that makes last month's workflow feel prehistoric. Codex ships overnight processing. Opus gets faster. Context windows double. None of this reduces the pressure. It multiplies it. You can do more now, and someone already is. The window to being first at anything feels like it's shrinking by the day. Literally, by the day. I replaced Netflix with Claude Code. I lie in bed thinking about what I can spin up before I fall asleep. What can I run while I'm unconscious? Reading a novel feels indulgent now. Watching a movie without a laptop open feels wasteful. This voice in my head says something could be running right now. Just doesn't shut off. I'm not even building a company. I'm just addicted to building my random ideas.
For the companies themselves, these tools become yet another excuse to not hire junior developers anymore. Our 4-person startup can now launch their app in less than 6 months by leaning on AI tools to do most of the coding, which is great, But then the new question becomes, why would an existing company hire a college graduate with no experience when they can just buy cursor subscriptions for the existing team of engineers? The upside is companies can get more work done, but I'm sure you're starting to notice the same pattern that popped up during the SaaS examples I laid out earlier. Companies need even less people because they are now replacing entire teams with AI tools, just like they've been doing with SaaS tools over the past 2 decades. Now then, the story becomes, just like the factory workers who came before, where do all the entry-level job seekers go if companies are no longer hiring at an entry level? How do you and your resume stand out in a job market where an AI model and a SaaS tool can already do your job? How do you gain work experience when a company no longer needs you?